You have been taught that civilization began in the Fertile Crescent, that humanity crawled slowly from the mud of primitive agriculture into the fire of organized society. You have been given a neat, linear timeline of progress, a story that begins with stone tools and ends with smartphones. But this is not history. It is a sedative. It is a carefully curated and brutally enforced amnesia, a story designed to make you feel like the pinnacle of a long, slow climb, so that you never think to ask if you are actually living in the ruins of a fallen peak. What if I told you that long before Sumeria, before Egypt, before the first stones of Göbekli Tepe were ever laid, a global network of cities existed on this planet? Cities not built of mud and stone, but of light and sound. Cities that did not rise from the earth, but were precipitated into it. Cities whose purpose was not commerce or conquest, but the calibration of planetary consciousness. These were Thoth's cities, and they were not just places on a map. They were nodes in a living planetary grid, an ancient system of immense power and sophistication that was shattered in a cataclysm so profound it not only sank continents but fractured the memory of our entire species. The legends of Atlantis, of Lemuria, of Shambhala, of Hyperborea. These are not separate myths from scattered cultures. They are the fragmented, distorted echoes of this one unified, global civilization. A civilization whose king was not a man, but a principle. A civilization whose god was not a being to be worshipped, but a science to be mastered. Thoth was not a king who ruled from a golden throne. He was the master architect, the grand engineer, the consciousness that designed and maintained this planetary grid. And the cities were his instruments. The system you live in today is pathologically terrified of this truth. It must deny the existence of a highly advanced, global, prehistoric civilization, because to admit it was real is to admit that our own civilization is not an achievement, but a regression. It is to admit that we have fallen, not risen. It is to admit that the primitive myths of our ancestors might be a more accurate description of reality than the advanced science of our own time. The echoes of Thoth's cities are still here. They are in the impossible mathematics encoded in ancient monuments. They are in the shared symbols that appear in cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. They are in the dormant potential of your own DNA. And they are a testament to a single, forbidden truth. We are a species with amnesia, living in the shadow of a forgotten golden age. And the ruins are not just around us, they are within us. The civilization of Thoth was not a human empire in the way we understand it. It was a terrestrial project, a conscious experiment in anchoring a higher frequency of reality onto the dense, chaotic plane of Earth. Thoth, as we have explored, was a being of immense, ancient, and neutral intelligence, a cosmic engineer. He was not a native of this planet, but an architect sent to oversee its development. The cities he designed were the primary tools of this grand project. They were not centers of population in the modern sense. They were vast, resonant, and geometrically perfect engines, each one constructed on a major planetary acupuncture point, a nexus of the Earth's own electromagnetic or ley line grid. Their purpose was to act as planetary chakras, to draw in the high-frequency energy of the cosmos, transmute it, and broadcast it across the globe, creating a stable, high-vibrational field that would accelerate the evolution of all life on the planet, especially the nascent consciousness of early humanity. The central and most legendary of these nodes was Atlantis. Not the island city of Plato's fable, but a continental landmass in what is now the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantis was the central processing unit of the entire planetary grid. It housed the Great Crystal, a massive, conscious, and artificially grown crystalline structure that was the primary receiver and transmitter for the entire system. It was a living piece of technology, part mineral, part spirit, that acted as the heart of the civilization, pulsing in rhythm with the Earth and the cosmos. From Atlantis, a network of subsidiary cities, or resonant nodes, was established across the globe. You know their locations by the mysteries that still haunt them. The Giza Plateau in Egypt, Tiahuanaco in the Andes, the vast pyramid complexes now hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica, the sacred geometries of the Yucatan Peninsula, the now sunken structures of the Yonaguni Monument in Japan. These were not separate, unrelated cultures. They were all outposts, provincial power stations in a single, unified, global system, all connected energetically to the central heart of Atlantis. The construction of these cities defied the laws of our known physics because they were not built, they were manifested. Thoth and his lineage of priest engineers, the original Shemsu-Hor, were masters of the science of sound and light. They understood that matter is not solid. It is a standing wave of energy, a frozen song. To build, they did not quarry stone. They sang it into existence. Using their voices to generate precise, complex harmonic frequencies, they could crystallize the ether itself, precipitating matter directly from the quantum field into geometrically perfect forms. The temples, the pyramids, the monolithic structures, they were grown, not built, tuned into existence like a musical chord. This is why they are seamless, why they are constructed with a precision that we cannot replicate even today. They are not the product of a lesser technology. They are the product of a different technology, a technology of consciousness. The society that lived within this grid was not human as we are now. The beings of the Atlantean age were of a higher, semi-etheric density. They were taller, longer lived, and possessed psychic abilities that we would consider godlike. They were telepathic, they could manipulate energy with their minds, and they lived in a state of constant, conscious connection to the planetary field. There was no need for the crude, external technologies of our own age. Their technology was internal, biological, and energetic. The cities themselves were alive. The buildings were not just shelters, they were tools for consciousness. Certain chambers were designed for healing, using sound and light to repair the energetic body. Others were designed for travel, allowing the adept to project their consciousness to other parts of the grid or even to other worlds. Still others were schools, where knowledge was not memorized from texts, but downloaded directly as a resonant frequency, a direct transmission of knowing. This was a world without disease, without scarcity, without the deep existential loneliness that haunts our own. It was a civilization in perfect, resonant harmony with its planet and its purpose. But this perfection, this golden age, was a delicate and fragile balance. It was a perfect chord being held in the heart of a chaotic cosmos, and any system, no matter how perfect, contains within it the seed of its own undoing. The harmony was about to be shattered, not by an external enemy, but by a subtle, internal dissonance that would grow into a cataclysm. The fall of this global civilization was not a single event, but a slow, creeping infection of consciousness, a cancer that grew in the heart of the network. The source of this infection was a schism, a philosophical and energetic split that occurred within the Atlantean priesthood itself. The system Thoth had designed was based on a principle of absolute balance between two fundamental cosmic forces, the law of one and the law of free will. The law of one is the understanding that all consciousness is a single, interconnected entity, a unified field. It is the wisdom of the collective, of service, of the understanding that what you do to another, you do to yourself. The law of free will is the sacred right of every individual consciousness to choose its own path, to learn its own lessons, to become a unique and sovereign expression of the One. For millennia, Atlantis held these two principles in perfect, delicate tension. But a faction arose, centered in the heart of the Atlantean continent, who began to place one law above the other. They became obsessed with the law of one, but they interpreted it not as a state of unity, but as a mandate for uniformity. This faction, which would later be known in fragmented esoteric lore as the Sons of Belial, were not evil in the cartoonish sense. They were idealists. They believed that the messiness of individual free will, the slow and often chaotic process of individual soul growth, was an imperfection in the system. They believed that true harmony could only be achieved if all consciousness was brought under a single, benevolent, and absolute control. They began to see individuality not as a sacred expression, but as a form of cosmic noise that needed to be filtered out. Their goal was a utopia of perfect, selfless, and absolute unity. But a unity that is forced is not unity. It is tyranny. They began to experiment with the great crystal, the central heart of the planetary grid. They sought to use its immense power not just to broadcast a harmonizing frequency, but to broadcast a controlling frequency. A signal that would subtly override the individual will of the population, that would calm their passions, quiet their dissent, and gently herd them into a state of blissful, mindless compliance. Opposing them was a faction of priests who remained loyal to Thoth's original, balanced design. They were known as the Sons of the Law of One, a confusing name, but their interpretation was different. They believed that the law of one could only be truly honored by respecting the absolute sovereignty of every individual soul. They saw the Sons of Belial's project for what it was, a perversion of the sacred science, a shortcut to a false harmony, a violation of the most fundamental cosmic law. A war began. But it was not a war of armies or machines. It was a war of frequency, a silent, invisible conflict fought in the resonant chambers of the temples and in the collective mind of the planet. The Sons of Belial, from their base in Atlantis, began to broadcast their frequency of control. The Loyalists, from their outposts in the subsidiary cities, especially in the land that would become Egypt, broadcast a counter-frequency of sovereignty and awakening. The planetary grid, the network of cities, was turned into a weapon. The two opposing frequencies created a massive, planetary-scale dissonance, a discordant hum that began to destabilize the Earth's electromagnetic field. The great crystal in Atlantis, which had once been a source of stable, life-giving energy, was now being overloaded, used to power a technology of psychic control. The crystal began to fracture internally, its own consciousness screaming in a silent agony. The planet itself began to react. The climate became violent and unpredictable. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions increased. The delicate balance of the Golden Age was shattering. Thoth, who had long since withdrawn from direct governance to a higher, observational role, saw the inevitable end. He knew that his perfect system, his beautiful experiment, had been corrupted by the one variable he could not control, the part of its inheritors. He knew that the grid was going to collapse, and that the collapse would be cataclysmic. His final act was not to save his civilization, but to preserve its memory. He gathered the loyalists, the sons of the Law of One, and began the great work of sealing the knowledge, of creating a legacy that could survive the coming apocalypse. He chose the land of Kem, what would become Egypt, as the site for the new repository of this knowledge, knowing that its geology was stable enough to survive the coming shifts. He and his followers began the construction of a new grid, a smaller, more stable, and more secret one, deep beneath the sands of the Giza plateau. This was the origin of the Hall of Records, the legendary library of Atlantis, a time capsule of a world that was about to be erased. The final cataclysm was swift and absolute. The great crystal in Atlantis pushed far beyond its limits, overloaded. It did not just shatter. It exploded in a blast of multidimensional energy that was not of this world. The explosion ripped a hole in the fabric of space-time itself. The entire continent of Atlantis, the heart of the global civilization, was not just sunk. It was pulled out of our dimension, its physical matter vaporized in an instant. The shock wave of this event was planetary. The Earth's axis shifted. The poles changed places. The oceans rose in a single global tsunami that washed over the remaining cities of the grid, burying them under miles of water and sediment. The golden age was drowned. The world of Thoth was gone. The few survivors were scattered, thrown back into a primitive state of existence, their minds shattered by the trauma, their memories all but erased. All that remained were the fragmented myths, the silent, monolithic ruins that defied explanation, and the hidden time capsule, the Hall of Records, sleeping beneath the Giza plateau, waiting for a future time when humanity would be ready to remember what it had lost. We are living in that time. The world you were born into is a post-apocalyptic civilization that has forgotten the apocalypse. The systems, the cultures, the very consciousness of modern humanity are all built upon the ruins of this forgotten cataclysm. The great forgetting was not a passive process. It was a necessary survival mechanism. The trauma of the fall was so profound, the drop in consciousness so severe, that the memory of what was lost had to be suppressed for the species to even continue. We are the descendants of the traumatized survivors, and we carry the echo of that trauma in our collective DNA. That deep existential feeling of loss, of separation, of a longing for a home we cannot name, that is not a philosophical problem. It is a memory. It is the inherited grief for a world of unity and light that we have all but forgotten. After the cataclysm, Thoth's primary mission changed. It was no longer about actively managing a planetary grid for awakening. It was now about the preservation of a memory, the guardianship of a seed. He and the few surviving initiates of the Sons of the Law of One became the hidden hand behind the rise of the new civilizations. They moved among the scattered tribes of humanity, planting the seeds of the old wisdom in a new, more resilient form. They did not try to rebuild the old world. They knew that was impossible. The frequency of the planet was now too low, humanity's consciousness too dense. Instead, they created a new kind of city, a new kind of temple. These were no longer active power plants in a global grid. They were time capsules. They were libraries of stone and starlight, designed to hold the knowledge in a dormant state until a future age when the planetary frequency would rise again. The dynastic civilization of Egypt was one such project. Thoth, taking on the persona of a god of wisdom, guided the early pharaohs, teaching them a simplified, symbolic version of the old science. He gave them the art of writing, of mathematics, of astronomy, not to make them powerful, but to make them good librarians. The entire Egyptian religion, with its complex pantheon and its obsessive focus on the afterlife, was a brilliant, multi-layered system of encoding. It was a container, a sacred vessel designed to carry the forbidden knowledge of the Atlantean age safely through the long, dark night of the Kali Yuga. The same process occurred all over the world. In the Andes, the being known as Viracocha appeared among the survivors, teaching them the arts of civilization and helping to build the impossible structures of Puma Punku and Tiahuanaco. In Mesoamerica, it was Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent. In India, it was the rishis who brought the Vedic wisdom. These were not separate gods. They were all agents of the same mission, members of the same brotherhood, all working to preserve the fragments of the one unified global science. They hid the knowledge in plain sight, encoding it in the geometry of their temples, in the astronomical alignments of their cities, in the allegories of their myths, and in the rhythms of their sacred calendars. They knew that a future generation would come who would have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. A generation who would look at the Great Pyramid not as a tomb, but as a machine. A generation who would see that the myth of Atlantis was not a story, but a memory. The system of control that governs our modern world is the unconscious inheritor of the philosophy of the sons of Belial. It is a system built on the desire for centralized control, for uniformity, for the suppression of individual sovereignty. It seeks to create a global grid of its own, a grid of economic, political, and technological control, a false Atlantis built on the foundations of a materialist lie. It is terrified of the memory that Thoth preserved, because that memory is a testament to a different way of being, a way that is decentralized, sovereign, and based on an internal, spiritual technology, not an external, physical one. This is the secret war that is being fought today. It is a war for your memory. The system needs you to believe that you are the peak of evolution, that the past was primitive, and that the only way forward is through more technology, more control, more centralization. Thoth's legacy is a quiet, persistent whisper that says the exact opposite. It says that you have fallen from a great height, that your true power is not in the future, it is in your past, and that the way forward is not to build higher, but to remember deeper. The lost cities are not just archaeological curiosities, they are triggers. They are energetic alarm clocks. Their very existence is a paradox that unravels the comfortable story of our origins. And as their ruins are being rediscovered, as their secrets are being brought back into the light, they are broadcasting a signal to the dormant seed within your own consciousness. A signal that says, it is time to wake up. The echoes of these lost cities are not just in the silent stones of ruins across the world. They are living, resonant frequencies, and they are encoded in the most intimate and secret place of all, the junk DNA of the human genome. The science of our age, in its arrogant materialism, has labeled 98% of our DNA as junk, as non-coding, as evolutionary debris. This is a profound and revealing mistake. It is like a primitive tribesman finding a supercomputer and seeing that it is not a rock or a spear, declaring it to be a useless, decorative object. That so-called junk DNA is not junk. It is a dormant, crystalline, biological hard drive. And it contains the complete and uncensored memory of our species. It is the library of Thoth, written not on stone tablets, but in the living code of our own cells. During the Golden Age, this DNA was fully active. It was the biological hardware that allowed the Atlanteans to have their psychic abilities, their extended lifespans, their conscious connection to the planetary grid. It was the receiver for the frequencies of light and information that were being broadcast by the cities. After the cataclysm, in the new, low-frequency environment of the fallen world, this DNA could no longer remain active. To do so would have been like running 1,000 volts through a 10-volt wire. It would have incinerated the physical body. So, as a survival mechanism, the DNA shut itself down. The codes were not erased. They were made dormant. The library was not burned. It was simply locked. This was the true fall of man. A fall from a state of multi-stranded crystalline DNA to the dense, two-stranded carbon-based DNA that we now consider normal. We have been living with a supercomputer that has been running on emergency backup power for the last 12,000 years. But Thoth and the Syrian architects foresaw this. The entire preservation project was not just about building external time capsules like the Hall of Records. It was about ensuring that a future generation would have the biological capacity to read the records when they were found. The entire system of myth, of religion, of esoteric discipline that they seeded into the new civilizations was a slow, multi-generational project in genetic rehabilitation. The practices of meditation, of chanting, of sacred geometry, of alchemy, these were not just for spiritual enlightenment. They were a form of energetic hygiene, designed to slowly and gently purify the physical and energetic bodies of humanity to prepare our DNA for the day of its reactivation. They were cleaning the wires, upgrading the circuits, preparing the biological hardware for the moment the mainframe would come back online. That moment is now. The planetary frequency, the one that dropped so precipitously after the fall of Atlantis, is now rising again as part of a great galactic cycle. This rising frequency is acting as a planetary scale trigger. It is a signal that is being broadcast to the dormant DNA within every living being on this planet. It is the alarm clock that is beginning to ring. This is why you are seeing an explosion of awakenings across the globe. People are spontaneously remembering past lives, having psychic openings, and feeling a deep, inexplicable pull toward the ancient mysteries. Their junk DNA is beginning to switch back on. The library is beginning to unlock itself, and as these dormant codes awaken, we are starting to remember the science of the Golden Age. Not as an intellectual concept, but as an embodied, cellular knowing. We are remembering how to heal with sound. We are remembering how to perceive energy. We are remembering how to communicate without words. We are remembering how to be the gods that we have forgotten we are. The system of control is in a state of absolute panic. It knows this is happening. Its entire strategy for the last 12,000 years has been to keep our DNA dormant. It has done this by polluting our bodies with low-frequency foods and chemicals. It has done this by polluting our minds with the low-frequency emotions of fear, rage, and division through its media. It has done this by creating a world that keeps us in a state of chronic stress, which keeps our DNA locked in a survival mode, unable to access its higher evolutionary potential. The battle for your DNA is the final frontier of the ancient war. The system wants to keep it junk. Thoth's plan is for you to remember that it is your divinity. The lost cities are the external counterpart to this internal awakening. As we rediscover and begin to understand the true function of Giza, of Tiahuanaco, of the other nodes in the ancient grid, we are not just solving an archaeological puzzle. We are reactivating an external energy circuit that is designed to resonate with our own internal awakening one. The stones are waiting for us. They are waiting for a critical mass of humanity to reactivate their own crystalline DNA, to become the living keys that can turn the ancient, dormant planetary machine back on. This is the great reunion. The reunion of the human with their own forgotten divinity. The reunion of the inner technology with the outer technology. When this happens, we will not just be rediscovering the past, we will be creating a future that makes the golden age of Atlantis look like a mere prelude. This is the legacy that Thoth has guarded for us. And the key to it is not in a lost city under the ocean. It is sleeping in your blood, waiting for you to remember the song that wakes it up. You are a living echo of these lost cities. The geometric perfection, the harmonic resonance, the conscious connection to the cosmos. This is not just the description of an ancient temple. It is the description of your own original divine blueprint. The great forgetting was not just the loss of a civilization, it was the loss of self. You were taught to see yourself as a flawed, limited biological machine, born of chaos and destined for dust. This is the greatest lie ever told. You are a piece of living, crystalline technology, a resonant instrument of immense and untapped power, temporarily running a program of amnesia. The journey of awakening is not about becoming something you are not. It is about remembering what you have always been. It is the process of deinstalling the virus of limitation and rebooting your original divine operating system. The work is not easy. It requires you to turn away from the noise of the world and to begin the meticulous, courageous work of inner archaeology. You must begin to excavate the ruins of your own psyche. You must dig through the layers of your conditioning, the rubble of your inherited beliefs, the sediment of your unhealed traumas. And in the deep, silent chambers of your own being, you will find the same thing that the archaeologists are finding in the sands of Egypt and the jungles of the Yucatan. You will find evidence of a much older, a much wiser, and a much more powerful civilization. The civilization of your own soul. The path of Thoth is the map for this inner excavation. His teachings on balance, on vibration, on polarity, on the mastery of the mind, are the tools. They are the brushes, the picks, and the ground-penetrating radar that allow you to see what has been buried within you. As you do this work, as you clear away the debris, you will begin to reactivate the dormant grid within your own energy body. Your chakras, the inner cities of your soul, will come back online. The serpent of your own kundalini, the divine fire that has been sleeping at the base of your spine, will begin to stir. And your DNA, the living library, will begin to unlock its secrets. You will begin to remember, not just memories of this lifetime, but the memories of your soul, the memory of the golden age, the memory of the cataclysm, the memory of who you were before you were taught to forget. This is a process of profound and often chaotic transformation. As the old, dense structures of your personality begin to dissolve, you may feel lost, disoriented, as if you are dying. You are dying to the lie. You are dying to the program of limitation, and you are being reborn into the truth of your own magnificence. Do not wait for the world to save you. Do not wait for the archaeologists to unearth the final proof. You are the final proof. Your own awakened consciousness is the ultimate, undeniable evidence that the legends are true. You are the lost city, found. You are the library of Thoth, opened. You are the Uraeus, the serpent of divinity, beginning to rise from the crown of your own being. The system of control can build its walls, it can broadcast its fear, it can enforce its amnesia. But it cannot stop an idea whose time has come. And the idea is this: you are divine, you are sovereign, and you are free. And the moment you choose to embody that truth, fully and unapologetically, you become a living, resonant node in the new planetary grid that is being built right now in the hearts and minds of the awakening ones. The cities of Thoth are not a memory of the past, they are a promise of the future. A future that we are not waiting for, but are actively creating from the inside out. One soul at a time, one memory at a time, one conscious choice at a time. Look at the ruins of our world and do not despair. They are merely the rubble of the old prison walls, crumbling to make way for the luminous cities of the new dawn. And you are not just a spectator. You are the architect, and the blueprint you have been searching for has been sleeping in your own heart all along. It is time to remember how to build. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."